exciting. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Rebecca. I think I have not much to say about myself after this. So it's a pleasure to meet all of you on here and speaking to you from Zambia. And I have an exciting presentation to share with all of you today under the theme Embrace Equity. So I will just go ahead and share my screen right now and we can get started. Yeah. Okay, so, okay.
Yep, it looks great.
There it is. Okay, yeah, there it is. Yeah, so it's good. All good, Rebecca?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, great. I'll get started then. So hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Irene Chikatula, speaking to you from Zambia, and I'm very delighted and honored to be sharing this presentation with you today. The theme of my presentation is embracing equity in our spaces. And so just to let you know a little bit about what to expect in this presentation, what we will be looking at is I will share a little bit of information about myself. I think not very different from what Rebecca has already shared. And I will also highlight a few points on the International Women's Day, just for everybody to get familiar with what it is all about. And I will also be looking at the gender equality trends, both from a global context, as well as a little bit of information about Zambia, where I live and work. And we will go on a little break after that. And after the break, I will talk about gender equality and gender equity, just to share a bit of information about the difference between the two, and also highlight what they really mean. Yeah, and then we will go into the nitty-gritties of the presentation, of the discussion, and that's where I will also talk a little bit about how we can embrace equity in our own spaces, where we are. It could be school, at home, at work, or anywhere else in the communities where we live. Yeah. So a bit of information about me. So who am I? My full name is Irene Chikatula, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization here in Zambia that is working to empower young people and women in rural communities. And I specialize in adolescent sexual reproductive health rights. I also specialize in social and economic mentorship. I like to call myself a mentor. I call myself an ally, a sister, a friend. I am also a mother of two amazing boys. And in this picture, it's me on the far right with a group of young people that I work with in my community. And we have been engaging them on different programs at the moment. So these are young people in school, and they're in the upper grades, I think 10 to 12. They are part of the mentors that we equip with skills to go and mentor other young people in their schools as well. Yeah. And so about the International Women's Day, I'm sure we have heard information about International Women's Day. We have lots of it, or maybe a bit different from mine, but I will also share from my perspective. So today is an exciting day for us, a very important day in history, in the history of women, and it's March 8th, and it's called the International Women's Day. So this day is commemorated every year, and it is devoted towards celebrating women's achievements and seeking gender equality. And like we say, the theme for this year, the campaign theme rather, is Embrace Equity. And so the International Women's Day was founded many years ago, and that is in 1913 by the UN. And after its declaration, it was celebrated for the first time in 1975. And in 1996, they announced the first annual theme, and by then it was celebrating the past, planning for the future. Yeah, so still sounding very similar to what we are trying to do right now as a world, as a continent. Yeah, just in general, because we are still celebrating past achievements. We're still trying to look at the current challenges and planning for the future, trying to see how we can make the future better, right? Yeah, so since that time, since the declaration, the International Women's Day has been celebrated in different parts of the world in many different ways, characterized by different events. So some people do march past, some people just have parties, some people have webinars, some people have presentations like we are having now. So it's done in many different ways. And if you can, I would like to know how the women in your lives, the important women in your lives, are spending their day to day. If you could drop just something in the chat just to look at that and share something, how you think people in your life, the women that you know, are celebrating their day to day, being such an important day in the history of women. Yeah. So moving on, I would like to share a bit of information about gender equality. So we're talking about the global trends. Yeah, I would like to talk about the global trends. And according to recent research, it actually suggests that at the moment, no country in the world has achieved full gender parity. So all the countries in the world, on all parts of this world, all the continents, no country has yet fully achieved the gender parity. And despite this, we are actually excited that there's 10 economies of the world who have closed at least 80% of their gender gaps. And Iceland is leading on the global ranking. The other 9 countries are Finland, Norway, New Zealand, Sweden, Nicaragua, Namibia, 1 country from Africa, Ireland, and Germany, in that order. Yeah. And so again, research and current reports are telling us that if the world continues to operate at the rate at which it is moving right now with regards to fighting for equality, it will take us another 132 years to close the global gender gap. Yeah. So if you look at my presentation on the right side of my slide, I've shared some information about how long it would take different parts of the world to actually achieve, to close the gender gap. And we can see that it is projected that North America would take the least number of years, which is 59 years, and Europe would take about 60 years, Latin America and the Caribbean would take about 67 years. The sub-Saharan Africa would take 98 years. Central Asia would take about 152 years. East Asia and the Pacific would take 168 years. And South Asia about 197 years. So this is if we continue at the rate which we are moving right now as the world, as the global in terms of fighting for gender equality, yeah, like I said. And yeah, so I thought it might be interesting also to highlight a little bit of information about the gender equality situation in Zambia, because this is where I work and live. I was born in Zambia. I grew up in Zambia. I've done my education in Zambia. And I was living in the city, actually in the urban parts of the country, but because of my work and family, I moved to a rural community where I am now working. And so I would like to share a bit of information about gender equality in Zambia. And interestingly, our country, Zambia, has what we call a dual system of governance. So this means we have 2 governance systems, the customary, which is from the traditional perspective, as well as the statutory, so the state laws and so on. So apparently in many rural communities, like where I live, the customary laws are very predominant. So there's hardly any presence of statutory laws. And this means that the customary laws, the traditional leaders are responsible for making decisions and are also responsible for passing judgment and so on and rulings. Yeah, so and being a society which has been very patriarchal, our customary laws tend to be a little bit biased towards favoring the men in many cases. So the rights of the women are not necessarily observed. And we find that women always endure unfair treatments in terms of being the ones who are always the most victims to child marriage. And they also bear the consequence of unequal distribution of property, and they also lack opportunities to paid work, because we know about the woman's domestic responsibilities in the home, the woman's childcare responsibilities, which take up most of their time. And so this always limits them more than the other gender in terms of opportunities. And also, this has given birth to dimensions of gender-based inequalities in terms of accessing reproductive health services and information, accessing education and economic activity, which in the end affects the quality of life of women. So through my organization, and being in a rural community where the customary law is mainly used, I decided to come in and see how I could help my community and many rural communities in Zambia to see how we can help them to advance their rights, to have their rights, women's rights recognized as well as respected. So I founded my organization to empower the women socially and economically as well. And through my organization, again, I'm fighting for gender equality by employing community-centered approaches. So this means I always have the communities at the center of the work that I do. So it starts from problem identification, trying to brainstorm on solutions, and also taking action. They're always at the center of everything. So my vision is to create an enabling environment that is free from poverty, violence, and inequality, where women and young people can be autonomous and reach their fullest potential. And on a much happier note, with the support from international NGOs and concerted efforts from local organizations, local level community-based organizations, Zambia has made notable progress in closing the gender gap. Just a report that I looked at recently from 2022, the country was now ranked at 62 out of 146 countries on the global index. And if we compare this to 2015, about 7 years ago or so, where it was ranked 115 out of 145 countries. So there's been a bit, some good progress. And I think if we continue on this trajectory, we might actually reach, be able to close the gender gap much, much faster as a country. Yeah. And so, Rebecca, I think we could maybe take a little break here.
For sure, yeah. I have a little activity that I can do with everybody to give us a little bit of a break before we do the second half of your presentation. But awesome so far. I'm already learning a lot. I hope you guys are all enjoying it as much as I am. I do have a few poll questions I would like to share with you all. So the poll option should pop up on the bottom of your phone or on the bottom of your computer screen. They're just ABCD questions. If you've been paying attention so far, you should for sure get a couple of these first ones. So my first question here is, what is the theme of International Women's Day for 2023? Now, these are all past International Women's Day themes. Which one is 2023? Is it I am gender equality, women in leadership, embrace equity, or gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow? So go ahead and find the poll option on whatever device you're on. If you're joining as a whole classroom, you can just try to get a bit of an answer from the whole class and pick whichever one is the most common. Okay, maybe I made the first one too easy. I think everybody thinks they know the answer to this one. You're right. The theme of our Women's Day this year is embrace equity. We all were paying attention to the first screen I shared, so that's awesome. Question number 2 is, what year was the first Women's Day celebrated in the United States? So what year do we think the very first Women's Day was? Was it in 1909, 1913, 1923, or 1952? So Women's Day is an international holiday now, but it originated in the United States. So what year did we have our first Women's Day? So also, if you're joining from YouTube, feel free to answer in the chat on YouTube as well. You guys can participate that way. So getting a kind of a mix here. We've got one for 1909. Quite a few are thinking 1950s. Nobody's thinking the 20s. Okay, I'll wait for maybe one more answer. Okay, this is a tricky one. So the correct answer for this one is actually 1909. So the very first Women's Day was in New York in 1909, forever ago. What is that, like 140, 114 years, something like that? So we've been celebrating women for a long time in the United States, which is totally awesome. Okay, question 3. When was International Women's Day adopted by the United Nations? So what do we think? Was it 1935 that it went international, 1949, 1965, or 1975? When did this become an international UN day? So I'm getting a few B's, a few D's. We're thinking the 40s or the 70s. Remember, the very first one was in 1909. So how long did it take for it to become an international holiday? Getting a big mix on this guy. Okay, I'll wait for one more answer. Last chance to get your answer in here. All right, correct answer for this one, not till 1975. So it took that many years, like 70 years, for it to finally become an international holiday with the UN. Hey, question 4. The global average for women's pay compared to men is blank cents for every dollar. So how many cents to the dollar do women make on average in the most recent poll? Do we make 57 cents for every $1, 78 cents for every $1, 82, or 94? And this number actually has gone up quite a bit in the last 10 years, which is awesome. Recently, it's increased quite a bit, which is great for us, but you'll notice there's no 100 on here. So we still have that pay gap that we're trying to fight against. So I'm seeing a mixture of ABCs. A lot of us are thinking B or C, 78 or 82. No answers for 94 cents on the dollar. I guess that's too close to equity. We all know we're not quite there yet. So correct answer for this one, 82. So we make 82 cents for every $1 that a man makes to do the same job. All right, last question. Of Earth's 195 countries, how many have a female head of state or government? So do we think 13 countries have a female head of state, 31, 72, or 125? So there's 195 countries on the planet. How many of them are led by women? All right, we're thinking it's small. A lot of us are thinking A. We've got a few B's. I know you guys could probably think of your country as an example. I'm here in Canada. We are led by a man, Justin Trudeau. We'll wait for a couple more. We're really split. We've got 50% A, 50% B. What's it going to be? All right. So the correct answer for this one is B, 31. So there's actually 34 heads of state. A few countries have more than one woman running the country, but 31 countries out of that 195. Not very good. We're not quite close to that 50% yet. All right, that's it for my little break that we have here. I will pass it back over to our guest speaker to do the second half of her presentation. Thank you for participating. And I hope that kind of started to resonate a little bit with some of the notes and facts that she's been sharing with us. So back to you, Irene.
Right, thank you. Okay, great. So we can get back to our session. And that was an interesting quiz, Rebecca. Great. I've also learned a lot actually from it. Thank you so much for sharing that. So yeah, so I talked a little bit about the International Women's Day, a little bit about the global trends in terms of gender equality from the global context, as well as from Zambia. And I will now go into talking about embracing equity. So I will talk about gender equality as well as gender equity. That's our next session. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about equality and equity. I don't know if we have all heard about these words before. And so equality and equity, what comes to your mind when you hear these words? What comes to your mind? Equality, equity, you know? So I will start this by asking a few questions. I mean, 2 questions rather. And I'll ask you to share something, maybe comment again if you can. What does being fair mean to you? What does being fair? If you say you're fair, that's fair. What does it mean to you? If you think about it. And then also, how many times have you said, but that's not fair? in a game with friends, or at school, at home with siblings, with your parents or guardians, or anywhere else? Have you ever had to express yourself in this way and say, but that's not fair? I have, I think, a lot of times. Yeah, so this is just helping us open our minds up a little bit about what equality and equity means. And so moving on, sorry, I'm just a bit stuck. Okay, yeah, so what does equality and equity mean? So I'm going to be looking at this in the context of gender. So gender equality. So equality simply means that everyone has the same equal chances. Everyone is treated the same, equally. That's what equality means. This is fair, isn't it? If you think about it, everyone in this world, every single person gets the same chances at something, gets treated the same way and in an equal way. That's what equality would be like in a nutshell. And equity, on the other hand, means that equity would mean that everyone has the same chances, just like equality, but also means considering different people's situations so that they really are treated fairly. Yeah, it just doesn't treat everybody equally, regardless of who they are or what it is that they need, but then they also look into their specific needs and tries to address those ones specifically. So this is fair, right? Yeah, I think. And so I wanted to explain further about equality and equity using an example. And this is a common example, which is used by many. And so I would ask you to just imagine this as I read it. So imagine 3 people of different heights wanting to watch a game of football. They are standing behind a fence which blocks their view. To help, they are all given boxes of the same size to stand on. They are being treated equally because these are people of different heights. However, some of them still can't see because they are the same height and they were given the same height of boxes to stand on. But if they're given different size boxes to stand on to help them all see, they would be treated with equity, actually. So this example is a very simple way of explaining and helping us to understand equality and equity. So these 3 people of different heights want to watch a football match and they are disadvantaged by their height, but to help them, somebody gives them boxes which are the same height again. And they have been treated equally without taking due consideration of their different heights. We just assume that they need something to step on to look at, to be able to watch the football. But then after trying to help them, we actually realized that it didn't work because it was not the right kind of help that they needed. Yeah, so that's about it. That's how I would explain it in an example, in a nutshell. And I wanted to ask you, just imagine this and you can share something if you like, or just think of other examples, about equity. It might be having, for example, a door, an automatic door to a public building so that everybody can get in and out of the building more easily. It might be giving someone extra help in school so that they can achieve success just like their classmates. It might be having a homework club in school so that children who can't work at home can still complete their tasks. So this is a few other more examples about equity. And for example, the first example, which talks about having an automatic door, for example. So having a door to a building is not actually enough. You would need to be as considerate as possible because you're thinking of other differently abled people who are not able to open a door handle or the knob and so on. So you would want to be as considerate as possible and have an automated door, which opens and shuts on its own with sensors, for example. That's one example of how we could achieve equity. It might be giving someone extra help in your school so that they can also achieve success just like everybody else, because not everybody has the same equal chances to participate in school equally, especially from my context, for example, where we have a lot of differences in socioeconomic status. There's also a lot of child abuse, which is prevalent, and this limits children's performance, for example, in school, and also affects their attendance and ultimately the outcome, the educational outcomes. So if there are others who notice that there's something like this and want to help their friends, it could be actually a way of achieving equity, because in a classroom, for example, pupils are treated equally by the teacher. You go in a classroom, you sit down and want to learn, you're all treated equal, you're being taught the same things at the same time. That's our situation usually in Zambia. And so the teacher does not have enough time to actually look into the specific needs of the pupils, of the different pupils, so that they can try to help them. But if other classmates or the teachers themselves realize that some pupils might need extra help and they decide to help them, that is more about equity and not equality. Yeah. So even ourselves trying to help out with friends who are struggling with homework, for example, or just sharing information that we know our friends may not know or may not have access to, can also be a way of an example of equity. Yeah. So this year's theme, Embracing Equity, is addressing 3 different themes or topics, subtopics rather, which are stereotypes, discrimination, and bias. So to go into details about how we can embrace equity, we have to understand a little bit about these 3 concepts. So also not concepts which are not uncommon to us, stereotypes, discrimination, and bias. So stereotypes, in simpler terms, are widespread, often unfair and untrue beliefs that people have about a certain type of person, group of people, or things with a particular characteristic. Discrimination is simply the unfair treatment of different people or groups of people based on things like gender, race, age, disability, and so on. And bias is to be unfairly in favor of or against a person or group, idea, or thing. Yeah, that's how I would explain those 3. And this year, we want to embrace equity, and we've done this in the past years, and we would like to continue doing this until we feel like we have actually achieved a more gender equal world, a more just and fair world. So how can we challenge stereotypes? What do you think of when we read about stereotypes? We talked about being widespread, often unfair and untrue beliefs that people have about a certain type of person, group of people, or things with a particular characteristic. For example, the simple notion of thinking that girls should love pink, or girls should play with dolls, boys should play with cars. That is stereotyping, actually, because you have just believed that a certain type of person can only be limited to doing one particular thing, which you believe actually is what they should do. Yeah, so, and then discrimination, the unfair treatment of people based on race, gender, culture, disability, socioeconomic status. Yeah, so this is about sidelining people based on what they look like or based on what they talk like, just basically about discriminating people based on what they are, basically. Yeah. And bias is more about taking sides, just unfairly in favor of or against a certain group or person. I'm going to explain a bit in details about this with the next examples that I'll go into now. So challenging stereotypes. We've talked about what stereotypes are, we've talked about what stereotyping means, and now how can we challenge stereotypes in our spaces, in our communities, in our schools, in our countries, and just as a globe? How can we challenge stereotypes? So you can think of some examples if you have, and it would be interesting to also know if you have something different to what I have shared now. It would be nice to look at that in the chat box. But I have put together a few examples of how I think we can challenge stereotypes in our own spaces as individuals. And this can be something as simple as, affirming that you can wear whatever you feel comfortable in. So stereotyping also has to do with what colors, like I said, what colors people should wear, or what type of clothes look good on girls or boys or people with people of different genders rather. So we can challenge stereotypes by saying that I can wear whatever I want. I wear what I am comfortable in, actually, not what I think society perceives or society dictates for me to wear. That's one way. And also career oriented, you can be whatever you want to be. That's one way of challenging stereotypes. This is also something that is not very common in many societies, especially from my side of things. People being able to freely decide what they want to be or what they want to do with their lives. It's not something that is very common. We still have a lot of influence from externally, people, either the community themselves, the family, friends. There's a lot of influence from that. Of course, it's nice to get advice from family, from friends. I love it, but I think it should not be imposed, actually. It should not be something that they impose on you. And so we can also challenge stereotypes by simply saying you can actually like anything you want. You can like any book you like, you can like any movie, any color or toy. It is nothing to do with gender. Liking a certain type of movie has nothing to do with gender. Liking a certain type of color or reading a certain type of book has nothing to do with gender. So we can challenge gender stereotypes by actually practicing the few examples that I've shared. But if you have something more that you think, you can share in the chat and we'll look at that as well. So on the right side of my slide, I have this young girl, Marina. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. So she is saying that she broke away from stereotypes when she decided to participate in a workshop on cars and engines. So if you go on the UN Women website, you find the story of Marina. And she's some young lady who was a young girl, actually, who was for many years looked down on by her teacher of mathematics. And he would always tell her that she was very down and that mathematics was not for girls. And so she decided to challenge everybody. She decided to challenge the teacher. She decided to challenge herself, first of all, by not believing that she's down and cannot solve mathematics. And so that's a beautiful example of how someone can actually challenge stereotypes. And she says here that it can be done differently without stereotypes. And I agree with that. So I will move on to the next way that we think we can employ to, we can apply, something we can do also to embrace equity as individuals in our own spaces is calling out discrimination. The picture here is just illustrating something about discrimination. So these two young people on the left side are actually isolating themselves from this other one on the right side based on something. The picture does not explain much, but maybe we are free to imagine it could be based on a race, maybe. It could be, based on maybe religion and so on, But this is just a typical example of what discrimination would look like. So how can we call out discrimination in our spaces? We can do this by inviting people to join our games. If you're active in sport, if you play games, you could be open enough to invite others to join you and not always be in a closed group of close friends and others stand by. I've heard examples here where a group of young people are playing and the other ones ask, can I please join in? And they say, no, we're already a team, you can't join us. So embracing equity is about how do we give everybody a chance? How do we give everybody an opportunity to participate, for example? So what if we make sub-teams? What if we do that and give others also a chance to play at some point? So this is one way. We could, like I say, we could invite people to join our games, our conversations, or our friendships. We could also learn more about different people that exist, understanding that everybody is different. and therefore treating everybody with respect as well as with caution. Yeah, so this has a lot to do. I'm sure we are learning a lot about all these things in our schools and at home as well, where we learn about the different cultures, the different religions, gender issues, and so on. Yeah, so this can help us a lot not to discriminate. And like I said in the beginning, I'm actually a mother of 2 boys. My oldest son is going to be 8 soon. And I'm trying so much to take him around and expose him a lot in the community where we live, so that he doesn't get that shock when he meets people who are differently abled, for example, or just people who have other differences from what he is. So I'm trying to take him around so that he just learns about all that and knows it early on. And of course, the school has also its role to play in all this. And we can avoid assumptions. That is one way of calling out discrimination, because assuming things about people always causes, it leads to discriminating in the end. So when we see people, we want to find out something. It is also not always good to approach people and ask a lot. Some people find it very, how do I say it? They just don't find it okay, actually. I'll give an example. If I traveled to Europe or just any other country which is in the Western world to visit, and then from time to time, I get people coming to ask me a lot about where I'm coming from. What is it like there? Of course, they're asking in good interest because they just want to know more about me, where I'm coming from. But I might also not take that, because I would think it's a bit racial, maybe. Why are they just curious about wanting to know where I come from? Why, so it's good to actually find a way of addressing our curiosities. And the best way for us as young people is to ask questions by speaking to our parents, to our educators, or the older people, first of all, about the questions we have, and then we can learn more about how to approach situations which we are curious about, especially about people. Yeah. And so we also have our third action point, which would be drawing attention to bias. This is one way that we can also embrace equity in our spaces. And how can we draw attention to bias? So in simple ways, I would say that drawing attention to bias means not separating from others based on gender, race, religion, or socioeconomic status. We can also draw attention to bias by doing a self-check. And right now, think about it as we talk. Do you think that you're treating everybody around you fairly? This is one way we could also just introspect and check ourselves. Am I doing the right thing all the time? Am I treating my siblings fairly, my friends, my parents, and everybody else, people I know, my colleagues in school, in the teams where we play, or anywhere else? Yeah, so this is one way that we can draw attention to bias. And if you think there's something that you're not doing right, or you think that you're not treating them well, then you might want to discuss that either with a grown-up and say, how can I do this better? Or how can I learn more about how to treat people fairly? Yeah, and also practicing mindful communication, choosing our words carefully. Like I gave an example before of maybe somebody like me traveling, who is Black, traveling to Europe and coming to get lots of questions about my origin and, the texture of my hair and so on. If people do it in a, just out of curiosity and in wanting to learn, but sometimes it can be misinterpreted. So we can really also break this bias by practicing mindful communication and choosing our words carefully. Yeah, just being able to know what might sound okay if you say it, and trying to rephrase it and see if it sounds better the other way. And young people like us in here, we always have the opportunity to discuss with the people, with grown-ups, or also in our peer groups. That is one way that we can learn from each other and help each other. Yeah. So finally, there is collective activism as one of the 4 points of how we can embrace equity in our spaces. And this is, so how can we go into collective activism? For example, young people in schools or in peer groups, in adolescent friendly spaces. How can we collectively try to embrace equity and advocate for gender equity and equality. So every one of us actually should support equality, because if we are not affected, then somebody next to us or somebody around us may be actually affected by it. And so there is no justice anywhere if there is injustice somewhere. So this is something that is a global fight. It's the challenges that are being faced across the globe in different contexts, of course. So we need to somehow collectively be activists and try to contribute to the achievement of equality. So we can engage in a collective action and stand together in solidarity. This can be done by embracing equity, and that means speaking up about the things we are not happy about in our spaces, for example, and also challenging ourselves to be more inclusive. Yeah. I think that's basically about what I had prepared for the Embrace Equity presentation. And I would like to wrap it up with a quote that I prepared specifically for this presentation. And it says, "I look forward to a time when everyone in this world will be accepted for who they are and will be allowed to use their talents, skills, and abilities regardless of their gender. And you and I can make this possible."
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So while I get going on our second presenter here, she just has a quick presentation, so we do only have about 10 minutes left. But while I'm presenting her and welcoming her, if any of you have any questions for our guest presenter, now's your chance to pop them in the chat. If they're all ready to go as soon as Fiona's done speaking, that makes it a lot easier and faster for us. So take a minute to think of a couple questions that you have for Irene. And while you're doing that, I would like to welcome Fiona. Fiona is an aspiring writer and activist, currently in the 11th grade at Havergal College based in Toronto, Canada. Her love for international relations stemmed from her extensive experiences in the Model UN. Model United Nations has encouraged her curiosity on multifaceted international issues, including feminist issues. So I would like to welcome Fiona. I'll pass it over to you. Also, are you good to share your screen? Because I also have your slides if you need me to.
Yes, I think, would it be okay if you shared my slides?
Yep, I can do them. Just make sure you let me know when you want me to go to the next slide, okay?
Okay, perfect. So I guess I'll start off by saying I want to first thank Ms. Chikatula for such an inspiring speech, and I wish everyone a happy International Women's Day. So thank you, Rebecca, for introducing me. My name is Fiona Shen. I consider myself a feminist, but specifically an intersectional feminist. So in my speech, I'll be talking about, firstly, investigating intersectional feminism, what that means, my personal experiences with feminism, as well as ways to make change and advice I would give to myself if I was in middle school still. So let's get started. Next slide. So I'll start off with a bit of a story. For myself personally, I love hockey, ice hockey, that is my sport. And so for a summer, I played for the Beijing girls team. And this was the first ever girls team in Beijing, which meant a lot of media coverage, a lot of people coming to interview us, etc. And during that summer, when I spent time discussing, how hockey was for the girls, everyone came to a consensus that they did not get enough ice time. So when they were in their respective team, all my teammates did not get any ice time in the teams they played for simply because they were girls. And during my short stay there, I also had similar experiences. You can see on the right side, my friend Gao Xi, I played with him that summer, and he was 2 years younger than me. And he would be on ice every single game, and I would not be put on ice at all. And even though I played competitively longer than he has, clearly I'm also taller, and I felt as if I was just as competent as he was, I was given no ice time. So I think this was probably one of my first instances of this idea that I'm so capable, and this empowerment inside of myself, telling myself that I'm just as capable as any boy on that team. Obviously, back then I didn't really know the term feminism, but through this experience, I feel as if that was one of my starting points that really fired this feminist aspect of myself in myself. And so next slide. For the rest of that summer, I wore play like a girl every single hockey practice I went to. Every chance I got, I wore this shirt. And so I think this was probably the first experience that I had calling myself like a feminist or something, or someone that was an advocate, where I felt really empowered wearing that shirt. And so you can see from this experience that this experience is very unique to myself because of my unique identities, being a second generation Canadian immigrant, as well as having a huge passion for hockey. So this is why I believe that feminism is very unique to everyone based off of your personal experiences. And feminism looks different from me than someone who have other experiences that are unique to themselves, which is why I think this segues really gracefully into intersectional feminism. So intersectional feminism, I'll be explaining what intersectionality is. Next slide, please. So intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. So essentially what intersectionality is to factor in our unique identities. I, as an East Asian woman, second generation immigrant, may experience my world or navigate the world differently than maybe a white feminist or a Black woman. And so these different experiences shape our realities and how we experience the world. How my compounded discrimination is experienced is because I'm East Asian, but also because I'm a woman. And so that is why intersectionality is so important to be recognized. Next slide. So intersectional feminism this term was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in her Mapping the Margin, Intersectionality, Identity Politics, and Violence Against Women of Color. And so one of the main things that she explains is that the feminist movement in society fails to address compounded discrimination. Oftentimes view these issues as very separate issues in our society. So for example, if we think about, different aspects of our identity, we might just think, okay, women issues in general. We might generalize the issues that we experience into just women issues, or the issues that Black individuals experience as, Black Lives Matter or these social movements. And we don't view these issues as compounded discrimination or things that we should be addressing as a whole. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, in the media, as well as in the status quo, a lot of these movements like Black Lives Matter, as well as the feminist movement, they work very separate to the other movement, right? Black Lives Matter has their own campaign. They have their own, issues they want to address. Whereas the feminist movement, they have their own issues they also want to address, but these two movements don't come together to address compounded discrimination or the issues that people might experience that have basically intersected identities. And so this is very problematic and something that explains to us why intersectional feminism is so incredibly important, because intersectional feminism essentially factors in factors that are unique to your own identity, and it recognizes that we have differences in our identities and that we are not all generalized as just women and woman issues, because we all have different problems we face in the society. Next slide. And so some suggestions I would say is, for my school, at least for this Feminist Alliance I've started this year at my school, is we like to say educate, engage, and empower. So this is a motto we have for our Feminist Alliance. And so we aim to educate youth on the multifaceted issues with gender inequality through publishing magazine issues and posting opinion pieces. We aim to engage youth through discussion forums based off of different themes, and we aim to empower young women through increasing representation through stories and encouraging them to voice their personal experiences. Next slide. Okay, so our vision is to see an increased number of youth discuss feminism issues through an intersectional approach, and our mission is to educate, engage, and empower young feminists from diverse backgrounds. So ways to support the cause. I think obviously this is from my own personal perspective. Again, I think we have to understand complex issues different women face in our society. I think that's one of the first things, is to educate ourselves, get ourselves more immersed into this topic. We also want to start conversations with peers about gender equality. Getting the conversation started is so incredibly important, because if you don't get the conversation started, there is no exposure to the topic itself. And be an active listener to those that are telling their story and experiences to give them confidence. I think this is really important, because people feel empowered when they feel heard, when they feel as if they belong to a certain group. And so these are the things that ways to support the cause or get the cause started. Next slide. So finally, I guess 2 pieces of advice from my end is, firstly, to incorporate your strengths into resolving the problem you're passionate about. This is something I'm very big on. I think it's very great to first recognize what your strengths are in problem solving, and then to resolve problems that you're passionate about. So personally for myself, I really like writing, and I also love international relations. And on top of that, I am a public speaker. I'm a model UN kid, speech and debate kid. And so I've incorporated my strength in resolving problems I'm passionate about through conducting interviews with female leaders, as well as writing articles and opinion pieces on women's rights. And secondly, join existing organizations that align with your cause. I think that oftentimes, like for me and myself, like in high school, I get very caught up, as well as my peers get very caught up on starting our own initiatives, taking on that leadership position, starting up an MPO, starting up all of these things, when in reality, there are already existing organizations that may have already started out causes that you are passionate about. So I think it's always good to just start off by joining an organization that align with your causes, see where that takes you. If that organization has, holes in it or areas you think that you can improve, then I think is a good way for you to segue into starting your own initiatives. So here are some final questions I would just leave everyone with. How do we implement intersectionality into our lives? How can we reflect on intersectionality and feminism? And how does it play a role in our lives? And lastly, what does the word feminism mean to you? And what women issues are you currently passionate about? Would be the final questions I would leave you with. Okay, thank you so much. And here is the organization that I work at. If you would like to find more information, it's on the slide.
Yeah, that a wonderful wrap up to these big ideas that Irene shared with us, to a youth actually doing these actions in her community. So yeah, if you're feeling inspired after that, I'll leave this up just for a minute so that you can all view it. I know we probably should have ended 5 minutes ago, but we can go to the hour if we want to take 5 more minutes. If you have any questions that you would like to share with either of our speakers, you can pop them in the chat. While we just wait to see if we have any last questions, I did actually have one question. I had mentioned to some of our youth that we were running this event and that we had these wonderful speakers coming in, and the couple of things that always came up as kind of focuses that they had, one of them was men. What would be your advice, or what are some things that you think are important in engaging men? Like, I know, Irene, you talked about how you have sons, or even our peers or our parents or our brothers. Any hints or tips on embracing men kind of in this equity fight? Irene, if you have any ideas.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for that question. Interesting, but I'll try to address it. Yeah. So first of all, I'll talk about boys, because boys grow into men, right? So for me, I think that we should try by all means to engage them when they are boys. And I'll give an example. My organization, when I actually launched it, was called Empowerment Initiative for Rural Women and Girls. But after a few years, I realized that this was not a good idea. I was sidelining the boys and we're leaving them out. So we actually had to rebrand, and we re-registered, and now we are operating as Empowerment Initiative for Rural Women and Adolescents. So we want to be as inclusive as possible. And we believe that if we can already bring the young people, the boys and the girls, in spaces where they're able to actually learn about the same things, then it helps. And so that's for the young people. So we teach them from early on. That's what I think. And then for the men, I think depending on the context as well, but also from my perspective, I think that if we can start to bring the men on board and making them understand that they can be allies in the struggle and not consider it as a competition. When women demand for equality, there's this common saying, it says, a man of quality does not fear a woman seeking equality. Yeah, so, something like that. If men can just come and understand this, and they can be allies in the struggle and not consider competition. And I know this is going to be something tough and something that might need a good approach and strategy. But I think with education that is gradual and creating focus group discussions, and also learning from existing organizations like Fiona said, there's a lot of those that actually are already in existence about how we can navigate around these things. Of course, we can make them tailor-made to suit our context. But I think the key is engagement, bringing them on board, letting them know what is happening and how they think they can be part of it as allies. So we're talking about that, something like that.
Totally.
Let's not take so much time there.
Yeah, I know, and I know we do. Our schools are kind of starting to hop off. So just like one last thought, Fiona, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on this idea as well?
I agree with everything Irene has mentioned. I think that one more thing adding on to Irene's point is I think there's a lot of stigma around the feminist movement right now in social media platforms as well as just the media. I feel as if there's this false narrative being portrayed that the feminist movement is like viewed like as antagonizing men, that the feminist movement is going against men, but that's really not what the feminist movement is about. And so I think combating that sort of stigma is something that's so important. And I think that's a first step to getting men on board with feminism and being an ally. This allyship is so incredibly important. So I think combating the stigma that, the feminist movement is about pitting against men and men getting defensive as a result, I think is a first step to creating this allyship and the support system.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. I wanted to say thank you. You guys both had so many amazing, wonderful, diverse ideas and perspectives today. Thank you so much for sharing with everybody here and everybody that's going to be joining us on YouTube. I had one quick reminder I wanted to share with all of our schools. If you liked this event, we do have another upcoming event. It's for secondary schools. So if you are a secondary school participating, it's on decolonizing climate actions. We have another wonderful speaker that will be joining us. So you can go ahead and scan that QR code or follow the link in the chat or visit our website, whatever is the easiest way for you to do it. So just a quick reminder to throw it out there. And one last final thank you. Thank you so much to both of our speakers. Thank you so much to all of the students participating. Again, that first step was educate, and we're doing that here today. So thanks so much for stopping in, participating, and being a part of this with me. I really appreciate it. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for listening in.
Bye. Thanks.